I poured myself a cup of tea. As I had every year, the scent of cinnamon rose gently from the dried orange peels I'd left out a month ago. Emily once said that smell could warm a whole kitchen. I brought a few slices along, placed them in a small porcelain jar. The glaze had long since faded. The edges chipped with time, but I kept it. It was a Christmas gift from my wife, given in 1987. Mark sat across from me, the leather of his chair sinking gently beneath his tall frame. Upstairs, the fireplace snapped and crackled. Outside, Isabella was adjusting the lights for the final time. Everything in the house was lit. Everything, except my son's eyes. I spoke quietly, as though the words were made of silk. I could make the turkey again this year. The one with the sage stuffing your mother used to like. Do you remember? She always said it was better than her grandmother's. Mark didn't answer right away. His fingers circled his wedding band, the metal flashing under the soft ceiling light. His shoulders pulled in slightly, as if a cold draft had just swept through the warmth of the room. Dad, he swallowed. I think this year, maybe you should go to Emily's. Isabella's parents are coming. The table's full. It'll be hard to make room. The words fell like a stone onto a frozen lake. No crack, no shatter, just a silence that deepened the cold. I didn't speak. I only looked toward the 12-foot tree in the living room, the one I had chosen. Paid for. Hauled back from a nursery up north. Every light had a price. Every plastic branch was a quiet compromise. And now, I was being asked to leave. Isabella entered carrying a box of candles, the scent of expensive vanilla trailing behind her. Would you like some ginger tea? Dad, she smiled. I remember you used to like that kind. I nodded, still sitting. Thank you, but I think I should head home. Mark followed me to the door. His voice lowered, nearly a whisper. I'm sorry, but you understand, right? I didn't answer. I simply placed my hand on the doorknob, colder than the December air just beyond the porch. And as I turned to go, I caught Isabella's eyes. Just briefly, but enough to see. Behind the sweet expression, a flicker of relief, like someone who's finally cleared an old object out of the house. Without turning, I said, if they ask, just tell them I wish them a peaceful holiday. And then I walked out. The Christmas lights sparkled down every street, but the house I once bought now held just enough darkness to remind me I no longer belonged there. I drove home in silence. No radio. No GPS. Just the old roads I once knew by heart. The ones I used to trust. The car stopped at an intersection near the old lumber shop, the one where I'd taken Mark years ago, to choose wood for his first bookshelf when he was 12. The light turned red. I didn't rush. A group of young people ran across the street, carrying a small Christmas tree, laughing loudly, and something stirred in my chest, not anger, not sorrow. Just a hollow space that quietly opened up after my son's words. Behind maybe you should go to Emily's wasn't just a casual suggestion. It was the conclusion of something that had begun long ago, so long I had forgotten when, or why, or how much of myself I had given away. The house in Spokane Valley wasn't large, but it had sunlight. Every morning, my wife would stand at the kitchen window, drying her hair, watching squirrels dash across the fence. She used to say, as long as a father has a home to return to, the children still know how to hold themselves right. She passed away that spring. 3 months later, Mark told me he wanted to get married. I sat in the quiet kitchen, the laughter gone. looking at the embossed envelope with the wedding invitation, listening to my son. Hesitant. Isabella wants to stay in the city. Dad. It's closer to work. More convenient. If we had a place near downtown, it would help a lot. I looked around the kitchen, at Maria's photo on the shelf, and I nodded. 3 weeks later, I sold the house. The price wasn't great. The neighborhood had gone downhill. I emptied my pension fund, withdrew what I'd saved for healthcare, and signed the deposit for their new apartment, one of those side-by-side units near the northern commercial district of Seattle. When I handed Mark the keys, he hugged me for a long time. After the wedding, you'll come live with us. Okay, we'll feel safer having you around when we start a family. I didn't answer. Just patted his back twice the way I used to when he first learned to stand. At the time, I felt lucky to have a son who still remembered to think of his father. On Mark's wedding day, I stood in the back row. Isabella, dressed in white, smiled brightly and pulled me in for photo after photo. You're my dad now. And that's enough. Think of this house as yours too. Her voice was sweet like honey stirred into cold tea. It didn't warm anything. Emily stood quietly to one side, offered her congratulations, then pulled me aside. You've already done more than your part. Please don't keep sacrificing. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder. They're newlyweds. Let's not be the grumpy old ones. I never moved in with them. The room they promised for me became a storage space, then a home gym. I only visited on weekends to fix the garden, repair plumbing, make Costco runs. They gave me a gate key, not a key to their hearts. Mark lost his job in their second year of marriage. I dipped into what was left of my emergency savings. Just for now. Dad, I'll pay it back as soon as things settle. Isabella stood behind him, holding her designer purse. We're really grateful. Dad. Now and then, Emily would ask quietly, Dad, do you ever notice anything strange? I only smiled. As long as they're living in peace, that's all I need. That's how I comforted myself. Until the Christmas gift I received was a polite request to leave the house I helped build. From the very beginning, Isabella had a way with words, especially the kind that softened a widowed father like me. She called me Dad the first time we met, without a flicker of hesitation. That afternoon, over lunch, she tilted her head, smiled gently, and placed her hand lightly on my arm. Dad, if it weren't for you, we'd have never dared to think about starting a family this soon. I just nodded. Awkward, grateful feeling. In that moment, like a man who still had purpose. After the wedding, I handed her a thick envelope. Inside was the money from the sale of our country home, the house Maria had tended down to every tile. Isabella teared up. She hugged me tightly. Dad, this is too much. Do you really trust us this much? I nodded. As long as I'm alive, you won't have to carry the burden alone. That night, I went home and took out a red pen. I crossed off the line in my notebook that read, "Save a little for winter roof repairs." I thought with a kind daughter-in-law like her, surely one day I'll have grandchildren sitting under that very roof. Not even 2 months later, Isabella called me. Dad, I'm thinking of redoing the kitchen. This one takes too long to heat. And when you come over, I want to cook something nice for you. I asked, how much? About $4,000. Dad, but I'll chip in slowly, month by month. Just keep the receipts. I didn't keep the receipts. It felt wrong. We were family. I wasn't a creditor. That weekend, Emily came by. As soon as she put her bag down, her eyes went to the stack of unopened boxes near the kitchen door. Did you buy something? Dad. No. Isabella ordered them. Said the old stove's too weak. She wants to cook a proper meal for me. Emily sat, opened the pot, ladled soup, but said nothing. After dinner, she wiped the table more carefully than usual, took out the trash without a word. At the doorstep, just before leaving, she turned back, our voice soft. Dad, please don't be upset, but have you ever wondered if people care for you because you still have something to give? I laughed, shook my head. She's my daughter-in-law. You can't go around being suspicious all the time. Emily didn't laugh with me. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes heavy. Patient, as if each word she said was a hand trying to pull me from waters I didn't know I was drowning in. I just worry that one day you won't be sad about the money, but about realizing the love wasn't real. I stroked her head gently, like I used to when she wore her hair in braids, and answered, real or not, time will tell. What matters is that we live decently enough not to regret. Emily nodded, but she didn't agree. She just knew I wouldn't listen. The living room changed with each month I visited. The family portraits on the shelves were replaced with abstract black and white prints. The armchair I gifted Mark when he graduated was moved to the basement to make space, they said. And the old teapot Maria used every weekend vanished. I asked. Once, what happened to the porcelain teapot? Isabella, ladling soup, replied lightly. I put it away. Dad, old things don't match the new cabinets. I said nothing. Those cabinets I'd paid for half because she once said, my parents come by often, and this tacky setup makes me embarrassed. I pitched in, thinking I was helping my son have a proper home. But with time, I began to feel like a passerby, stopping in only to fix a leak, hammer a frame, then quietly disappear. Emily kept visiting, sometimes with a jar of pickled apricots, sometimes a bag of dried nuts, sometimes just oranges from her backyard. No pomp, no grand gestures. Nothing left behind but presence timed. Quiet. Enough. One winter evening, we all sat down to eat. Isabella brought out a salad, arranged like something from a magazine. She set it in front of me with a cheerful voice. Try this. Dad, I learned it from an Italian chef. It looks good. So it tastes better too. Emily stared at the plate, then slowly poked her fork in, murmuring, I guess that depends on who's eating. Isabella kept smiling, turned to me. What do you think? Dad, it's prettier than the old stuff. Right. I nodded. Taste is different. Looks nice too. Emily put down her fork, eyes not meeting anyone's. Our meals were never about looks, just whether the one cooking had us in mind. The room paused for a beat. Isabella gave a dry laugh, spinning her glass. Well, times have changed. Sis. Mark cut in right away. Emily. Stop. It's just a dish. No need for jabs. I stepped in. Let's not argue. Everyone means well. Emily said no more, but she took longer than usual to gather dishes, standing at the sink with her shoulders trembling slightly, and I didn't know if it was from cold or from what she held back. Afterward, I stepped out to the porch. Emily stood there, hands in her coat pockets, staring into the unlit yard. I spoke gently. "Don't be too hard. She's trying. Wants the house to feel lively." Emily was quiet for a while. Then she turned, looked at me, long and steady. "Maybe you think I'm harsh, but that's only because you've grown used to people faking kindness." I had no reply. The night wind brushed past the eaves, and I suddenly remembered the teapot they'd put away was Maria's last birthday gift before she died. I went to Mark's house in the second week of December, same as every year. Around this time, I usually dropped by to see if they needed help with decorations or repairs. In recent years, Isabella had taken charge of the decor, and I helped with the heavier work. I once climbed onto the icy roof just to hang a string of Italian LED lights she insisted on because American lights are too harsh. Not soft enough. This year, the tree was tucked in the corner, nearly touching the ceiling, strung with soft gold lights, crimson boughs, and metallic-wrapped gift boxes below, picture perfect. But something about it felt cold. Not the kind from wind or snow, but from too much precision. Like a room that had no space left for anything real. I arrived early on purpose, hoping to speak privately. Not about anything specific, I just wanted to feel like I still had a place in everything that was being prepared. Isabella had just finished baking and cracked the oven open. The scent of butter filled the air. "Hi, Dad, the cookies are still warm. Want to try one?" "What kind are they?" "Almond macarons. I learned from a French chef's video. It's tricky, but they look beautiful." I took a bite, sweet, crisp, and airy. It crumbled like foam. Nothing like the cookies Maria used to make. The kind that grew richer with time. Mark was in the living room, adjusting a new picture frame. It was a sleek black one with a glass edge. The family photo from last year had been replaced by a shot of the two of them standing on a yacht, probably from a summer trip to San Diego. I asked, "Where's the old photo?" Mark didn't turn around. "Oh, we put it away. The house was messy and that one, it wasn't flattering." I nodded, then sat on the beige leather sofa. The cushions were new, I'd paid for half. I thought it would help my aching back during visits. But lately, I'd been seated at the far end of the table, the spot that made it easier to leave early. A little later, Isabella brought out a few wrapped gifts to label. "I'm organizing Christmas presents. Do you want to help wrap some?" I smiled. "Sure. I'm not good at it. But maybe I can lend a hand." She handed me a spool of ribbon and said, "Can you wrap the ones for my family? Dad, my parents will be staying with us the whole week." He hesitated, then nodded. "Oh, that'll be lively." "Yes. We're actually pretty full this year," Isabella said. Still, snipping tape. I asked, almost without thinking, "So, which room am I staying in?" Mark came out of the living room, scratching his head. "Dad, we're still figuring that out." Their eyes flicked toward each other quick, but not quick enough to hide the truth. I was now an extra piece in a plan long since made. Mark brought me another cup of tea and set it on the coffee table across from me. "Dad?" I looked up. His voice dropped, as if he were about to say something he didn't want to say out loud. "This year, we thought maybe you could stay at Emily's for a few days." I set the cup down. Quiet. "Why?" Mark glanced toward Isabella. She was placing the final bow on a gift, But her hands had slowed. Isabella's parents are flying in from Florida. They're getting older. I'm just worried it might be too crowded. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I understood. I nodded. I see. Isabella looked up and smiled gently. Please don't be upset. Dad, older folks can be particular. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I pressed my lips together, glanced slowly around the house. The glowing tree, the neatly stacked gifts, the new tableware, the fresh tablecloth, the newly upholstered chairs, all part of expense lists I'd approved via bank transfer. From my retirement fund. Mark tried to keep his tone light. How about dinner next week? Just us. I'll drive you over. We'll have a proper father-son evening. I stood up. My left knee popped a sharp sound of age. But this time, I didn't lean on the chair for support. I let myself wobble a little, just to remember what it felt like when even a handhold wasn't offered. No need. I'll go. Dad, maybe stay for dinner. That's all right. I reached for my coat, putting it on slowly. Not because I was tired, but to give them time, just in case someone would ask me to stay. No one did. As I stepped out onto the porch, Isabella called after me, same sweet voice. Soft, as always. Kind enough to cut. Dad, don't forget to send Emily our Christmas wishes. Okay. I didn't respond. But I turned back, and in that brief moment, I saw her eyes no longer explaining, no longer appeasing, just the look of someone who had finally cleared the last unwanted thing out of her home, a flicker of satisfaction. The door shut gently behind me. Not locked. I stepped into the light spilling across the porch stairs, reflecting off the same shoes I'd worn for 3 winters. The scent of baked butter lingered, but it had become something else, something distant. Mark didn't follow. No one saw me off. I got into my car and started the engine. It ran smoothly. The road led southward through familiar turns, the soft descent passing the neighborhood where my old house once stood. The same house I sold to help Mark start his life, with a promise that echoed, "Still come live with us." Dad. No one repeated that promise anymore. I arrived home just as dusk fell. The house was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the heater. I made myself a cup of tea, the cheap kind I'd bought on sale over the weekend. The taste was thin, the aroma faint, but it warmed my hands enough. There was only one bowl on the table. I wasn't hungry, but I sat down anyway. A habit left over from the days when Maria was still around. She used to scold me gently for skipping meals. Old folks shouldn't miss dinner. She'd say. Now, there was no one to remind me. I opened the drawer beneath the desk. A thick brown envelope lay undisturbed inside where I'd stuffed all the documents. Receipts, bank statements, debt acknowledgments, and snapshots of every payment I'd ever made. I laid each paper flat on the table, not out of anger, not regret, just to finally see the truth, how far I had gone. In the name of family. Each sheet was a small incision, $320. 000, withdrawn from my retirement account. A small house in the countryside where Maria and I had lived for 28 years sold below market value. Just to secure a down payment for Mark's home. 60 consecutive mortgage payments. Every one on time. $800 each. Just until they settle. As Isabella once said. And dozens of smaller bills, roof repairs. Washer replacement. Tutoring fees, for a grandchild I'd never met. She's too young. Won't remember yet. they said. I held the statement from the first month. Back then, I'd scribbled a note at the bottom, hope they find stability soon. Month 13. Takes longer than I thought. But I can still manage. February. The following year, no note at all. I sat there until late. The yellow light above cast long shadows. Outside, wind slipped through a window frame. I hadn't gotten around to sealing. This house small, old, chipped walls and fraying carpet was the only place that had never refused me. But it was also where I had quietly lost myself, month by month. I picked up the cooled cup of tea, took a sip, and let out a quiet laugh. Turns out, numbers don't lie. Only I had been lying to myself. I woke earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, nor because of restlessness or resentment, but because of a new kind of silence, a strange hush. As if even the house knew that this morning I would finally do something I should have done years ago. I moved slowly, set the kettle on the stove, spooned out coffee grounds into the filter, the same cheap blend I'd grown used to in these later months. Saving every dollar for gas bills, school fees, plumbing work, Isabella said, was urgent if we didn't want the house to fall apart. As the boiling water sank through the brown grounds, I stood watching each drop fall as if it were being drawn straight out of me, out of the years I'd poured into others without asking for more than a proper seat at the table. I sat by the window, in the wooden chair with its worn backrest, opened my old laptop, its keyboard worn thin, where my fingers had repeated the same motions every 15th of the month. The login screen blinked. Scheduled transfer. $2. 800 month, Wells Fargo account, ending in 7,423. It was nothing new. I had seen those words countless times before. But today, they no longer brought the same quiet reassurance. Today, they felt like the edge of an old wound sealed over, but still tender, and ready to bleed at a touch. I moved the cursor to edit, then clicked Cancel. A confirmation box appeared, like a familiar voice asking one last time to reconsider. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transaction? I sat still for a long while, not to hesitate but to feel the weight of the words enough now. Then I clicked Yes. No trembling. The screen returned to its usual calm. No kime. No grand message. Just a quiet note in the corner. Transfer canceled. Effective immediately. I closed the laptop, stood up, poured myself a cup of coffee that had cooled just slightly bitter. Thin, forgettable, and yet today, strangely warm. Outside the window, snow was falling lightly, as if even the sky knew not to disturb this moment. No one else knew what had just happened. No messages would come. No alarms would ring. But something had ended a string of silent offerings that I once called sacrifice, but which, in truth, had been a slow erasure of my own name from the hearts of those I once called my own. And no one would know that after all this time, I had finally used money to buy back the rest of my life. I was wiping the kitchen window when the phone rang. No unknown number. No hidden caller ID. Isabella. I set the cloth down and looked at the screen, blinking steadily. 3 days had passed since I canceled the transfer. No messages. No questions. No one noticed the money had stopped until now. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice light, as if nothing had changed. "How are you feeling?" I didn't answer right away, just gave her a short reply. "Fine." She got straight to it. "Are you free this afternoon?" "Dad, My parents are flying in from Florida, landing at 2 o'clock at Spokane Airport. I raised my eyebrows, glanced at the old wall clock Maria had hung years ago, its minute hand still slightly off. What time? 2 o'clock sharp. If you could get there a bit early. They've got luggage. They'll be at carousel number 3. I heard the shuffle of papers on the other end, likely her holiday checklist. I said, I thought I wasn't invited to Christmas this year. She let out a soft chuckle. Oh, come on. Dad, that was just a little misunderstanding. This is real life. The house is full. Everyone's busy. You're the only one free at that time. I didn't bother reminding her that just 3 days ago, this free person had been told to stay at Emily's. She pressed on. A bit sharper now. Please. Dad, do it for me. Okay, and dress neatly, maybe that blue shirt you wore last time. My parents noticed details. I rested my hand on the window frame. Outside, the sky was dull gray. The snow just beginning to fall. I looked down at my hands, sun-darkened, calloused, cracked. These were the same hands that once knocked on bank doors asking for extensions, just to keep their house standing. And now, those hands were being summoned to haul luggage. I spoke slowly. Are you finished? Isabella paused. Sorry, oh. Yes. That's all. Good. I hung up. No explanation. No second question. I returned to the table, poured the rest of my coffee, added a small spoonful of sugar, just enough to take away the bitterness. At 2:15 p.m., I was sitting in my armchair, sipping Earl Grey. The newspaper rested open on my lap, sports on the right, weather on the left. Spokane was expecting clear skies, a light northwest breeze. No sign of any storm, except for the one likely brewing at baggage claim 3. I didn't call back. Didn't send a message. The phone buzzed twice, once from Isabella, once from an unknown number. I let both ring out, then turned the page. At 3 p.m., I began organizing the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept the odds and ends. I never had time to sort because I was too busy fixing their plumbing or replacing their dated rugs. At 3:35, the 5th call came in. Isabella again. I flipped the phone over, stepped out onto the porch, and stood in the sunlight a while. Winter seemed kinder this year. Or maybe I had simply stopped waiting for others to make me feel warm. At 4 p.m., I pulled out some cold cuts, made a sandwich, and reheated a bowl of tomato soup. For 5 years I had lived like a shadow inside the house I'd paid for, unseen and uncounted. But today, I ate like someone with the right to choose. Choose his food. Choose his time. Choose not to answer calls from people who'd never asked what he needed. At 4:30, the pounding on the front door began louder and louder. Then footsteps, heavy on the wooden porch. Then Isabella's voice sharp, trembling, trying to stay polite, but cracking. Dad, are you in there? Open up. What the hell are you doing? I didn't respond, but I stood up, slowly. When I opened the door, all 3 of them burst in, as if this house were still theirs to command. Cody, her father, marched to the center of the room, his face flushed like he'd just sprinted through a blizzard. You left 2 elderly people standing at the airport for nearly 3 hours. His voice came down like a verdict, not a question. I don't recall agreeing to pick anyone up. I said, my hand still resting on the doorknob. Didn't agree, Catherine, her mother snapped. Then who did she talk to this morning? A ghost. I heard. I nodded, but hearing isn't the same as saying yes. Isabella was the last to enter. Her makeup had smudged around the eyes, either from snow or fury. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, staring at me. You've humiliated us. We couldn't even lift our heads. How could you let my parents take a taxi? I answered calmly. They made it. Didn't they? Which means they didn't really need me. Cody stepped forward, finger jabbing toward my face. Let me remind you, you begged us to accept you into this family. I said nothing, but I remembered what Emily once told me. People often reveal their truest selves when they speak of debts never owed. Catherine chimed in, her tone practiced like someone who's used to commanding staff. You're old and bitter. Leaving seniors like us at the airport, that's the behavior of uneducated men. Isabella lifted her chin. People with dignity don't act like that. You embarrass this whole family. I let out a small laugh, not loud. Not long. Just enough to still the air. This. I looked straight at her. You call this a family that discards someone every Christmas because they don't fit the mood. No one replied. I walked slowly to the sideboard, the one Isabella once said was just for classy things, and placed a heavy folder on the marble top. They stood motionless, as if still holding the right to accuse, forgetting whose house they were standing in. You can go now, I said without looking back. And next time, if you want me to play chauffeur, at least learn how to ask. They didn't speak, just turned and left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. But silence followed. A silence so deep I could hear the wind slipping past the window pane. I turned around, picked up the newspaper. A few flakes of snow from their shoes lay melting on the rug. They'd be gone soon. That morning, as I sat by the window with a fresh cup of coffee, the steam gently fogging the glass, my eyes landed on the front page of the paper. A familiar face stared back from page 3, a cropped image from my old company ID beneath a headline heavier than Spokane's December skies. Elderly couple abandoned at airport amid winter storm warning. I froze. Not from shock, but from something else, pity. Perhaps. For myself. For a name that once stood for pride in my family, now reduced to a headline in cold ink, beside a photo that no longer reflected the man I was. I read slowly. Mr. Cody and Mrs. Catherine Jenkins, parents of a local entrepreneur's wife, were left stranded for hours in severe weather conditions due to the negligence of a family member with a known history of instability. No mention of the Christmas I was denied. No mention of the 5 years of quiet financial support. No mention that the invitation to pick them up was a demand, wrapped in politeness, without a trace of gratitude. Just a one-sided story dripping with pity and performative virtue. The article was written by Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor of the Spokane Review. I'd never heard of her. But the precision of the language, the timing of the publication, it wasn't accidental. I folded the paper, didn't tear it, didn't burn it. I placed it gently on the table, beside my cooling coffee, next to an old photo of Maria and me in the woodshop back when I first cut a piece of pine to make a bookshelf for Emily. I sat there for a long time, letting the hurt spread slowly, not with rage, not with resistance, just the quiet realization that, after all these years, I no longer had a place in their version of the story, but I still had mine. And I knew how to tell it not with shouting, not with tears, but with the truth. That afternoon, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk, the one where Maria's old leather briefcase had rested untouched for years. She gave it to me when I opened my first workshop. Dust coated the clasp. It had sat too long like a version of myself that only lived for others. I opened it not to return to work, but to begin the last job I owed myself to tell the whole story. Page by page, I gathered every envelope, copies of the scheduled bank transfers from my personal account to Mark Steller's, withdrawal forms from my retirement fund, the deed from the sale of the house Maria loved, receipts for appliances, invoices for remodeling, itemized costs for the kitchen Isabella once called a bit outdated. Then came the list every dollar I'd ever given. San. $200 for roof repairs after that spring storm. Sick. $500 for a couch Isabella claimed matched the space. Sushati. 000 from the house sale to secure the down payment. In total over 320. Ling. Not counting groceries. Not counting toilet paper. Not counting the times they said, "Dad, this month's been tight." I printed it all, sorted it, marked every item in red ink, underlined every lie in the article, scribbled notes in the margins beside every distortion. I wasn't looking to correct the record. I was preparing to expose it. Then I went online, typed in 3 names: Cody Jenkins, Catherine Jenkins, Isabella Flores. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I saved every photo. The kitchen remodel, with the oven I paid for. The Mexico vacation booked the same week they claimed financial trouble. Isabella grinning beside last year's tree, the one lit with string lights I was still paying off. I opened a new folder, titled it The Truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt clear. No one stood beside me. No one needed to. I wasn't thinking of justice in some grand sense. I was thinking of a Christmas night when all their lights couldn't hide what I was about to bring. And this time, I wouldn't need to knock. That night, as the printer clicked to a stop and I sealed the final envelope, the phone rang. Emily. She rarely called this late. Usually just short texts, Dad. Wear something warm. Is your stair light still flickering? Sometimes a photo of the kids camping in the backyard. But tonight, her voice was low and steady, like a breath drawn in the dark. Dad, I saw the article. I didn't answer. The clock ticked steadily above us, and something settled in my chest. I know it's not true. You do too. And I remember the first time she came to dinner. How she flattered you with canned soup. I saw it. But when I said anything, you brushed it off. I breathed out slowly. I thought, anyone marrying my son deserved my trust. I know, she replied. I never blamed you. But Dad, would you like to come spend Christmas with us? I froze, not because of the invitation, but because of how it was spoken, not as an obligation, not as pity, just a simple offer, to hold something from breaking. It's nothing fancy. Dad, she added, laughing softly, just roast chicken, pumpkin soup, and the kids begging for hot cocoa every hour. Tom's building a snow fort in the yard. Emma made you a card last week. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that once hammered together a wooden car for Mark to cast him. Now, trembling slightly, not from cold, but from something more fragile, the feeling of being wanted. Just come. Dad, Emily said, you don't have to bring anything. We just want you. I nodded. She couldn't see, but I did. No one brought up money. No one asked who was right or wrong. There was just a table real. And people real. I glanced at the folder on the desk. There would be a night for that. A night when those who built their Christmas on another man's wallet would be shown the receipt. But Christmas Eve. I knew. Now. Where I would be. At a table that didn't need an invoice to understand what family meant. Night fell. I couldn't sleep. Even with new sheets. Even with the bedside lamp no longer flickering. Ever since I rewired the outlet with the money I should have sent, I lay awake. One hand resting on my chest. Listening to the quiet rhythm of a heart that had finally begun to beat for itself. Memories didn't knock. They returned like they always do, slow. Uninvited. But certain. I remembered Emily's wedding. A crisp autumn morning. Breeze light in the air. Her hair lifting gently as she stepped out of the bridal car. She smiled at me softly, as if afraid it might make me sad. Because she knew I couldn't give her the wedding she deserved. I didn't have the money. Her dress was sewn by a friend. The rings paid for by Tom, who sold his old car. I stood there in a worn shirt, holding a bouquet I had arranged myself as my only gift. Because back then, every cent had gone into Mark's home in the city. Because he was getting married. Because I believed that the woman he chose would be my daughter. Because I told myself Emily would understand she was strong. She wouldn't mind. And she didn't. She never said a word. But tonight, I realized the child who stayed quiet was the one who had loved me the most. And I had listened to the loud one, not the one who carried the weight without complaint. I lay still, staring at the ceiling. Emily's voice echoing gently. Just come. Dad? Not to make me feel better, but to let me know that I still had somewhere to return to a home that didn't require installments, just presence. I closed my eyes, and knew with absolute clarity tomorrow, when I leave that envelope on every seat in that other house, I won't go to reclaim the money. I'll go to reclaim myself for Emily, for Maria, and for the father I'd misplaced in the name of trust. In Spokane. Winter settles early. By 6:30 p.m. I pulled up across the street from their brightly lit home, every light twinkling like a postcard. The tree by the window sparkled with symmetry. Ribbons tied tight. Gift boxes arranged with showroom precision. Everything, just like the pictures Isabella posted. We love the holidays. I checked the time. Luke, Sister Luke. Right on cue. They'd be seated now. Appetizers plated. Laughter still loud enough not to hear the door creak open. The door wasn't locked. Just like every year. Isabella had always been proud of that. This is a good neighborhood. Not like those other places. I walked in, silent. The folder in my hand weighed more than any gift I'd ever carried. Cutlery clinked. Glasses toasted. A woman's voice laughed from the dining room. But that's not how we do things in our family. Right. Catherine. I stood at the threshold when 12 faces turned toward me. And in that moment, I saw it all. Isabella. Mid-toast. Her wine glass frozen in the air. Mark. At the far end. Pale as if he'd swallowed ice. Cody and Catherine. Knives in hand. Looking as though they'd seen a ghost. I walked slowly to the buffet table, Isabella's display-only marble slab, and placed the folder down. No one spoke. No one moved. I opened the case, pulled out the first stack of papers, and began laying them down like cards. One by one. Guest neighbors. Co-workers. Charity. Friends received a copy. Neatly clipped. Each containing bank statements. Photographs. Receipts. The article. My notes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I said, "You should know who really paid for tonight's celebration." No one touched their drink. No one lifted their fork. I placed the newspaper article at the center of the table. The red marks clearly visible. This line isn't true. This one ignores context. And this one I pointed is an insult to a man who spent his life building the walls you're now leaning on. There was no defense, only eyes shifting from confusion to shame. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply laid the evidence down like placing a spoon in a child's hand so they could taste the truth for themselves. The room, once filled with clinking glasses and praise, now echoed with the rustle of pages and tight breaths. Guests flipped through the documents. The host said nothing. There was no denial, just the silence of a table too well lit to hide. A woman in a dark wool coat lowered her glasses and asked quietly, "Isabella, is this true?" Isabella stood, her hand gripping the chair. "It's not what it looks like." Walter offered to help. He chose this. I looked up at her. "You call over $300,000 help. You call 5 years of scheduled transfers voluntary." Mark stammered, "Dad, I didn't know she wrote the article. I swear, I just thought you needed rest." "You wanted peace." I interrupted. "Not for me, for yourself, so I wouldn't upset the color palette of your holiday dinner." Cody scoffed from the end of the table. "You think you can walk in here with your sad little display and reclaim dignity? Everyone loses their mind when they're old. That article was preventative." I turned to him. Calmly. "Preventative. You printed my face beside words like unstable during the holidays, and you call it preventative?" Catherine snapped. "You've shamed us in front of our friends. What do you gain from ruining Christmas?" I smiled, just barely. I spent 5 Christmases in silence, funding a family I wasn't allowed to join at the table. Another guest, clearly one of Mark's business partners, flipped through the documents. "Mark, is this real? The loans, the invoices, the article you let your father carry all this, and then you turn on him?" Mark hung his head. Isabella clenched her jaw. A woman from the local charity held up a photo. "Isabella, this was you at Grand Lux. Exact date, your power bill was paid." "With his money?" Isabella snapped. "It wasn't his money." I laid the bank receipt gently in front of her. "June dues. Su by T-shirt. Sisher Wu. From me to your joint account. Same day, seafood tower, and $60 glasses of wine." Isabella straightened, forced a smile. "You're making a scene. This is a dinner. A family dinner." I met her eyes. "No. This is a stage. And I just drew the curtain." Mark stayed silent. I turned to him. "You once called me your hero. Do you remember that 5th grade? When I fixed your bike in the snow, you said I was the strongest man you knew." He didn't speak, just swallowed hard. "You said, after the wedding, Dad won't have to be alone anymore. I sold my house, gave up my pension, every drop, and then you sat by while your wife called me a burden, an old man who didn't match the decor. Your mother, Maria, once told me, 'Don't be mad at outsiders if your own child won't defend you.' Tonight, I understand what she meant." Isabella stood up, voice shrill. "I never said that. You're twisting everything. You're the one playing victim." I didn't argue. I simply played the recording. Her voice clear. Cold calling me a broke Mexican who doesn't belong at a table with educated people. The room fell still. Cody and Catherine looked down. Mark shrank in his seat. I turned to Isabella. Voice quiet. Maria didn't speak 4 languages like your mother, but she cleaned bathrooms so her children could go to school. She never once looked down on sweat. Isabella whispered, trembling. I didn't mean it. You meant every word. Then I faced Mark. You let your wife bury me in silence for 5 years. He tried to rise. Couldn't. I was wrong. Dad, I know I failed you. But I raised a hand. Gently. No need to apologize, because I don't need your permission to know my worth. I looked around. The room had changed. Not a word from anyone. No pity. No doubt. Only the silence that follows a real storm. I picked up my folder. At the door, I turned back. I didn't ruin this dinner. I simply returned it to the truth. The rest is yours to swallow. And I left in silence. Behind me, chairs scraped. Catherine gasped. We can't let him defame us, Cody growled. I'll sue, but I didn't look back. That night, I didn't need to win. I just needed not to be dismissed.